Vamos a tener la intervención de Tom Klein de Certares, que es uno de los fondos de inversión más importantes en materia de turismo de todo el mundo. Y ojo, Tom tiene una larga carrera previa en la industria de los viajes, pues fue director, CEO y presidente de Sabre. Él va a ser entrevistado ni más ni menos que por el Investor Officer de Walton Street Capital. Buenas tardes, qué bueno que están con nosotros.
Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes.
Tom, a pleasure. Good
Hi,
seeing you
Eduardo.
again.
How are you?
Doing great. How about yourself?
Very well, thank you. I have to shout out to my old friend Jason Toothman, who I'm following. We worked together for a long time.
Great. Again, I see we're all wearing, pandemic formal. Nobody stand up, please. That would be very embarrassing.
Exactly.
So, Tom, we were talking about, the panels were talking about health and everything. And one of the things that I see in our industry right now is a huge dichotomy because on the one hand, it's one of the most affected industries. Many hotels are completely shut down. However, it's also been seen as one of the industries that will present the most attractive opportunities. And where we're seeing as investors, a lot of dry powder lining up to be able to take advantage of these opportunities. So if you could, initially just walk down what you're seeing from an investor perspective, what you're seeing in the marketplace, how all this disruption will create new opportunities, that would be great to get this conversation started.
Sure. So, Eduardo, our firm hopes you're right because all we do is invest in travel and tourism. So it's the entirety of our business. And we closed a new fund in January. So we have a significant amount of dry powder, and our view is as optimistic as you just suggested that there will be opportunities. I think what we've seen and what's been going on across the industry is the investment opportunities, or I should say, the deals that have happened for the most part have been private placements into public companies. And that's for a couple of different reasons. And you saw our firm, Certares, invested in a control stake in TripAdvisor. Silver Lake and Apollo invested in Expedia. Silver Lake partnered with Sixth Street to invest in Airbnb. So you've seen some private investment going in with kind of structured financing into some large entities. And part of that is these entities are easier to diligence, right? I mean, it's tough to do a deal when you can't go out and talk to the management team and see the business as it operates, or visit a hotel to walk around and see what it looks like. So it's been hard to diligence. And the public markets, I think, potentially more quickly than some of the private markets, realize the need to build up their balance sheet to make their way through this crisis. So what you saw, and you saw it across the cruise industry as well, a lot of fundraising to just create liquidity that gave everybody confidence that they were going to come out the other side. So a lot of the initial investment activity that we've seen, and again, the only deal that we've done has been in the category of a private placement into a public company. Again, in our case, TripAdvisor. As far as what we're seeing, we are seeing an awful lot of companies that are distressed, and the tougher part of travel, which is quite different than not every sector, but of a lot of sectors, is this lack of predictability around when business is going to come back. And so you have companies that are burning cash today. They've done everything they can to reduce their cost base and to shutter operations and do the things that they had to do, but at the end of the day, they still have, in most cases, some debt to service. They still have some people that have to be on staff. They still have costs that are running through the business, and they don't have any revenue to speak of. So, and you don't know when that's going to end. So it makes deal making hard. And I think that while there will be deal flow, I think it's still a little early. Because people are having a hard time building a model on returns when they can't see when the recovery is actually going to happen.
No, I completely agree. I think the biggest unknown here is timing. When will we be able to come back? When will people be comfortable going back? And we'll talk about some of that, going forward, how that business comes back. But, trying to look past what I would call this transition period, where do you think the opportunities will be? Once we get kind of a sense of that timing, where do you think investment opportunities will really be in?
Yeah, well, again, I mean, unfortunately, opportunities come out of distress very often, right? And so in the travel sector, the large hotel brands who are management companies, not real estate owners for the most part, have said that many of their owners are going to have distress assets and it'll take a little while for that to flow through. We're probably a couple months away from when, just because of the way lenders act and behave, a couple months away from when deal flow starts to happen. But I think we're going to see, again, just based on the comments of people like Marriott, a lot of properties that are distressed, and I think out of that will come opportunities in the real estate sector and in the hospitality sector. We think that in a lot of markets around the world, distribution where we're heavily invested, we have American Express Global Business Travel. We have a leisure travel business called Travel Leaders, which has a presence in Mexico in partnership with Corporate Travel Services owned by Jose Luis Castro, who many in the travel community in Mexico would know. Many of these markets are going to have a very distressed set of distribution assets in the countries. I mean, travel agencies' phones aren't ringing right now. And in many cases, these are medium-sized or basically medium-sized businesses. And I think there's going to be opportunities for the ones with the strongest balance sheets coming out of this, or for investors who want to go in and help rejuvenate the industry, to have big wins coming out of this crisis. And as Jason said, we're very bullish on recovery. We'll talk more about that as we go along here, but it's just a matter of when. But in the process, unfortunately, a lot of travel companies are quite distressed.
And do you see any new businesses arising from this? I mean, new opportunities, new ways of doing business?
That's a very debatable and good question. I think what at its core, the trends that we were seeing coming into this, which is, and let's leave business travel aside for a second, but on the leisure travel side, the trends that we saw coming into this crisis were things like wellness and once-in-a-lifetime experiences and adventure and outdoors and all those types of things, are very well suited for strong recoveries out of this crisis. When everybody, who couldn't use a visit to a wellness spa right now? I'd say most people on the call would say that sounds like a great idea. So I think a lot of the trends that we saw coming into this are very well suited for actually accelerating coming out. As far as new businesses, I do think on the corporate side that duty of care is a big topic in a lot of markets, not as big in some markets as others. And that just means that when a company is sending travelers abroad or really on any trip, that the company has some responsibility, some duty to take care of the wellness of that employee, right? It's in some countries it's a legal obligation. In other countries, in any business, if you believe what we all say when we're running businesses is that my team is my most important asset, well, you have to take care of them. And I think the level of services that maybe will be wrapped around what companies do when they send their employees on trips may create new opportunities, either for the providers that are already in that space or for some new providers. Other than that, I'm a believer in that we will get back to normal. I think that there'll be some protocols that are a little bit different. I'm all for cleaner hotels. I'm all for cleaner airports. Maybe getting in and out of some of these places is going to be a little harder than it's historically been, but I don't think that's a new business opportunity. I think that's just going to be a new normal.
So you mentioned, as we get back to this new normal, there's been a ton of value destruction, in the past few months, and probably is still some of that to happen in the next coming months. But do you see the overall value of the real strong assets post-pandemic? Do you see those coming back to where they were before? Or do you think people will view this industry overall as riskier and as such command a bigger premium and have an effect on prices?
Yeah, so I do think that, and I think as a firm, we believe strongly that the value of the assets will snap back. And again, it's depending on the asset, it's going to take some time. The damage and destruction that's happening right now is, the most vulnerable are those who have a lot of leverage in the business, right? So if you came into this with a strong balance sheet and had cash to work your way through this, the underlying value of the asset should be recaptured relatively. Again, it might take a couple of years depending on the sector, but we think things will snap back to reasonable valuations. And valuation will be driven by the things that they've always been driven by. It'll be driven by growth rates. It'll be driven by levels of profitability. It'll be driven by uniqueness of the asset, right? And we don't think any of that changes. And I also don't believe that we will see an undue burden on valuation based on this pandemic. The industry, I heard Gloria's name mentioned several times earlier, Gloria Guevara's name mentioned, at World Travel and Tourism forums. I've been on stage and spoken about the biggest risk to the industry being, a serious pandemic like this one. Mr. Marriott has been on stage talking about, and he was actually the first one I ever heard talk about the real risk. The only thing that can stop the travel industry is what Mr. Marriott said a number of years ago at one of these forums, is a global pandemic. And this is a once in 100-year event. And we unless you believe that it's not a once in 100-year event, then investing in travel historically has been a really smart thing to do. It's travel generally grows faster than GDP. It had a lot of tailwinds as far as the various trends out there that support travel growth, and of course there's going to be a little bit of the shock of this pandemic is going to have to wear off a little bit, but I don't think people are going to hedge their travel investments based on the view that you could have more frequent than every 100-year pandemics. And hopefully we all come out of this much smarter, much more prepared. I mean, one of the themes in all those talks over the years about the one big thing that could happen in our industry was a universal understanding that we really weren't ready for it. And this one has shown that, from a healthcare perspective, as well as from just a kind of a shared understanding in society about what could be necessary and what the realities of this type of pandemic is, we should come out of this much smarter and much more resilient about how to deal with future issues like this.
And I guess also a lesson there is to pay more attention to speakers and symposiums, right?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we used to use it as a defensive, it was like, well, what's the big risk? Because truthfully, the smaller issues, which are horrible issues, but the smaller episodic events, whether they were terrorism or whether they were shorter term pandemics, they really had very short-term impact on the travel industry. The travel industry's had this history of having these very aggressive snapbacks to normal, and so the extended period of time here is what's different, and usually those talks were We're more about when bad things happen, this industry is resilient and it snaps back. This time it's a little different.
So I think, again, as we mentioned, I think it's great that we, as an industry, have great tailwinds and a lot of trends that we believe will survive and continue and will help the industry thrive. So as an investor, when you look at that and you see all these opportunities that will probably arise, what are the pitfalls? I mean, what concerns you when you look at, call it either a property or a destination? What can really go wrong to not recover well and get back to that normal?
I think, okay, well, let's talk about, let me start with the positive and then let's go to what are the things that could go wrong. The positive things, because I think if you play to these themes, then maybe you kind of, by a process of elimination, get to some of the things you worry about. The positive things coming into this were that young people in general a good chunk of young people viewed travel as a lifestyle, not as a, when I was a kid, travel was aspirational and maybe you did it once in a while and maybe you had an annual vacation and that was terrific. Young people today view it as like a lifestyle and much more frequent trips, short trips, long trips, a lot of adventure, willingness to try new things, no fear about cultural barriers. I mean, that is absolutely, you see it and it's borderless. So whether you talk to, a 19-year-old that lives in Beijing or, a 21-year-old that lives in Mexico City or a kid growing up in Ohio, they all have this view that travel is something that's going to be, already is, or will be a normal part of their life, and it's not kind of a once in a while thing. So I think that just means more travel, and it means when the example that we always kick around is when the bankers on Wall Street, when the 23-year-old got his first bonus, he'd go out and buy a Rolex or he'd buy a car or something. Now they don't do that. They take a trip. And they take spectacular trips. You have young people spending a lot of money. A big chunk of their disposable income is being spent on travel. And on the other side of the barbell, you have people who have worked all their lives and saved money and also view travel as more of a lifestyle. So you have increasingly empty nesters who will not just go on a trip, but go live in Mexico City for 2 months. It's not a 1-week vacation. I mean, you have seniors who have deep pockets, and sometimes not so deep pockets, who are just adventurous and feel like the world's their oyster and they can run around and travel. And that's a trend that we see as well. Multi-generational travel, it was a trend that we saw where grandparents are taking extended families on. We own a couple river cruise companies. And we see river cruises with, families with, 35, 40 people from a family showing up on a river cruise. That's a trend. And then finally, like opulent, expensive travel. Our travel agents in North America are selling vacations that are, annual earnings for most of us. There's people that are spending more and more and more on unique experiences and once in a lifetime things, and really creating experiences in places that used to be inaccessible and now are accessible. So all of that are great tailwinds for travel, and we don't think any of that goes away. In fact, there's some evidence that this notion that we've all been sitting at home is that there's going to be a real acceleration once people feel, as Jason said earlier, once people feel that it's safe and that they can stay healthy when they travel, that they're going to get after it. And, there's hotels right now, hotels are reopening in Florida as an example, and they're filling up as they open. So some of the major brands are capping occupancy at 70%, and they can sell 200% if they would. I mean, there's just a lot of pent up demand. So what can go wrong?
Exactly.
So I'm going to talk. I'm going to use, and I don't want to be disparaging about one of my favorite destinations, but you know, I just had been on the board of Playa Resorts for the last couple of years, and Playa had a number of spectacular properties. One of which is in Cancun, the Hyatt Ziva and Hyatt Zilara. And you know, if you think about future investment in places, so if you think about what's going on in Mexico, so when you have a destination that's as spectacular as that, what can mess it up, right? And I think in Mexico right now, there's a few things. One is there's been an overhang of a security issue for a couple of years now. Now, I think there's been a lot of resilience all along the Yucatan, and travelers will continue to show up, but there's a dark backdrop related to security. There needs to be a public solution to the security issues over time. There's a Sargasso issue which dirties the beaches, which is an environmental issue. There needs to be a public and private solution to that because it's creating a drag for the owners there today, and it's something that investors coming in will be concerned about. And then finally, I don't think we can hide behind the fact that the current policies are dampening investment. Certainly, you're seeing it in the equity markets in Mexico. The current government policies, which are not completely transparent and not understood by international investors, will be a drag on investments. So, you as an investor, you look at those types of things, like what else is there? And I think, certainly government policy, welcomeness to international investment, rule of law, all those things matter. And as we look around the world, and we do look globally for opportunities, those things are all on our checklist, and they are in the checklist of most investors.
Yeah, and it's amazing as the same ones that were on the checklist prior to this. So to wrap it up, let me just throw one at you. As looking back, 5-7 years from now, when you look back at it, do you think, or give me some that you might think is a change we'll see in our properties that will arise out of this? Is there anything that you can point to that you will say, this came out of the 2020 pandemic?
I think it will accelerate the use, the hotel check-in process and the hotel technology on property has been slow to change, and there's real cost to it. I think that part of the experience will accelerate. I think more touchless types of access. So whether it's your phone as a room key, or some other model, I think that will happen. I think free check-in, where you're not spending time standing at the desk and signing a bunch of stuff and handing documents back and forth. I think those types of things, because they'll wind up being more efficient once people have made the investment, and they're going to have to do it coming out of COVID. I think there'll be some fundamental changes that happen at the hotel. But again, I'm an optimist in that I think there's a look, we like going, most of us, not everybody, but we like to go to hotels that make us feel at home. We like to go to hotels that make us feel welcome, and that comes from people, and it comes from interaction that you have with the staff and the team. And I don't think 5 years from now we're going to be void of those interactions. In fact, I think we'll not only will they exist, but we'll maybe the big change is that we'll be much more appreciative of them, knowing how badly we missed them when we couldn't have them.
Let me tell you, at least I know I'm one of those. So I'm desperate to get back on a plane and desperate to get back to those beautiful properties that we've had the pleasure of experiencing.
For everybody,
thank you very much.
I just want to do one commercial. So
Sure.
I'm not a commercial for Marriott, but it is a Marriott hotel. I'll be on an airplane in the morning. I'll be checking into the The Edition in South Beach, it opens for the first time tomorrow at noon. I'll get there around 12:30. So, I for one, I've been in this business for 30 years, and I've not been home this long forever in those 30 years. So I'm bullish on travel bouncing back, and I want to be part of the recovery.
Oh, that makes two of us at least. Congratulations on the opening, and thank you so much. It's great to have a lot more optimism coming around, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more of it. Thank you all
Thanks
for
so
listening,
much.
and
Thanks,
stay
Eduardo.
healthy and stay responsible. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom. Gracias, Eduardo.
Gracias.
Gracias.